vMix is designed for live video productions and has a lot of features and buttons that you can press. If you want to streamline your production, reduce your button presses, and let vMix do some of the heavy lifting, you'll want to use triggers. Triggers do tasks for you based on certain conditions. For instance, when a video ends, rather than you manually switching back to a camera, you can set a trigger to automatically switch to that camera for you. Or if you want to show a logo or lower third title for a few seconds when you switch to a particular shot, you can set this up in just a few clicks and you'll never need to do it again manually. In this video, we'll go over all the triggers available in vMix and how they might be used to help you streamline your production. vMix 27 and 28 introduce new triggers, so if you want to learn about any specific ones, check the timeline and jump straight to them. Hi, I'm Heath from vMix. If you're new, make sure that you watch some of our introductory videos to understand how vMix works, as this video builds on those fundamentals. Also, make sure you use our free 60-day trial of vMix Pro, as the Pro Edition offers all of the features of vMix for you to try out without any limits or watermarks. While triggers are available to use in any edition of vMix, some are designed to work with specific features only available in certain vMix editions, such as zoom, instant replay, and mix effects. Alright, here we are in the vMix interface. I've already set up a few inputs. I've got my camera with embedded audio so that you can see and hear me. I've got a video input, a few titles, a countdown timer, and an instant replay session. If any of these input types are unfamiliar to you, you can find a video about them on our YouTube channel. The main thing to understand with triggers is you set them up on the input where the trigger condition will occur, and you specify a function to take place whenever it does occur. So using the earlier example, if I wanted to automatically transition to my camera as soon as a video I was playing completed, then I would go to the settings of that input, I'd click on triggers, and then select from the trigger column here, the OnCompletion Trigger. One important thing to note is that the OnCompletion Trigger only works with video files, audio files, and lists. That's because they all have an endpoint. Now, the list can be used in two different ways. If you've got it set to auto next, to play one after the other in sequence automatically, then the OnCompletion will only occur at the very end of the sequence of lists. If you have it set to not play automatically, then it will occur at the end of the file you're playing at the time. Back to the menu, we can set a function to occur. So we can pick any function from the list of shortcut functions available in vMix. We're going to stick with fade here, so I'll click on that. And next we need to decide what we're fading to. So we're going to fade to my camera, which is input 1 right here called main cam. And then we can set a duration. This is how long the fade will take to occur. It's listed in milliseconds. We're going to extend it to 2000 milliseconds or 2 seconds. And then next we can set a delay. We don't need a delay for this particular function because we want the transition to occur as soon as the video ends. So I will leave that blank. Next we go down to the mix. vMix has mix inputs that allow you to have completely secondary or tertiary mixes, which are separate productions running inside of vMix. In this case, we're only going to use mix 1, which is the main interface and its preview and output. So we can leave this on 1. Now all we need to do is click add, and this trigger is now in place. Let's fade this in and let it do its job. And there we go. It automatically did a 2-second fade at the very, very end of the video. Now you would have noticed that it started that fade transition right at the end of the video. So we actually saw that final frame static for quite a while because we were using a fade and not a cut. Now there is a way to overcome that, and it's one of the later triggers that I'm going to talk about. But for now, what I want to talk about are the next two triggers in that list, which are on transition in and on transition out. They're designed to trigger when an input goes into output and when the input leaves output. So we'll use the one for going into output, and what we're going to do is we're going to have a title pop up on my screen, which is that number 10 title, because that's the first number that I'm going to be talking about with my top 10 favorite solar panels. All right, let's go. We are going to go to my camera. because that's where I want to place the trigger. And from here, we're going to the triggers list, and we're going to find on transition in. From here, we're going to find the right function. And in this case, it is an overlay function. So we're going down to overlays, and I'm going to overlay in that number 10 title. So there we go. And now I need to find the number 10 GT title. There it is right there. And I don't want to do it immediately. I want it to take a couple of seconds before we put it up. So let's pop in 2000 again and click on add. All right, so now we've got it popping up with a very slight delay. Now let's talk about these delays for a second. There are a couple of important things when it comes to triggers. The first one is that delays must be 30 seconds or less. If you want to go any longer than that, you're probably trying to do some sort of complex automation, and we would recommend using a playlist or scripting for that. The other thing to note is that delays will stack, but they'll only stack on matching triggers. So if you have two triggers with the exact same name, for instance, if I had two on transition in triggers on this input, and I had them one after the other, the first has to occur before the second one can start. And that means that that second trigger, if it's called on transition in, will take at least 2 seconds to begin. If I put a delay on that, let's say a second delay, then that would mean it's going to start in 3 seconds total. Hopefully that makes sense. It's very important to understand, so I recommend that you do run lots of test, and test again situations to make sure that things work. All right, we've got that set up. Let's close it down. Let's send this video into output once more. I'm going to cut it right to the end so that we can see that title turn up nice and quickly. So here we go. There we go. It took a little while, and then my title turned up here. So very good. Let me talk about number 10. No, I'm not going to do that. It's just, this is all about triggers. All right. We're going to go back to the trigger list now. Let's have a look at it. And here we've got on overlay in and on overlay out. So these two triggers are very similar to the on transition in and on transition out, and they function if an input comes into an overlay or comes off an overlay. A way that I might use this in my particular workflow today is I could go to my title and say that on overlay out, I could go and overlay another title that's number 9, for instance. We're not going to demonstrate that one in full because it's a little bit repetitive. Okay, I'll just turn that overlay off, and let's have a look at some of those other triggers. So here we've got on AudioMeter dB6, dB12, and dB18. So as soon as you reach either -18, -12, or -6 decibels, you're going to trigger a function. Do note that these are quite simple functions, and they do have a few limitations, so make sure you do lots of testing if you try to use them. Moving down, we have on countdown completed. This is a special function designed to work with countdown timer inputs. So we'll go down to the settings, and we'll pick on countdown completed. And this time, let's cut to our video, and that will allow us to have a countdown timer that plays and then starts our video automatically. So I'll click add, close that down, and we'll go to the title editor, and here we can have a look in the settings, and we can see that it's a 5-second countdown. So we can start that countdown, and 4, 3, 2, 1, and our video will play. There we go. All right, there we go. And now my title turns up again, of course, because it's triggered. So let's move on to our next trigger. So we'll just open up any settings, and they are on-call connected and on-call disconnected. Now, these are obviously designed for calls, specifically vMix calls, and they're to be applied to vMix caller inputs. And basically, as soon as a caller connects to that input, you can do something. And a good example would be maybe cut to them, or alternatively, when they drop out, you might want to have a placeholder card of an image of them if you're worried about them dropping out because they have a bad connection. or something like that. So that's how you can use those. Then we've got 3 on-zoom active speaker triggers. They have slightly different functions. We do talk about them in our Zoom video, but put simply, they're designed to allow you to control your Zoom meeting and use the Zoom built-in active speaker mode to trigger things. So for instance, if you want to show the active speaker larger or on their own screen or something like that, you can use these triggers. The first two are very, very similar. The only difference being that the one that is titled on Zoom active speaker while in output will only work if the active speaker is already in output. And the final one is designed for the vMix interface itself. If the vMix interface is indeed the active speaker, then you can use it for that. There are some complexities to that, so I definitely urge you to watch the Zoom video that we have because we go through all of the details. The next triggers that we have are on playback time and on playback remaining. These are the triggers that I was actually talking about right at the start of the video once we did our on completion trigger. They allow you to specify a particular time in a video or list input in order to trigger. And that is going to be very helpful for us to tighten up this intro video transitioning to my camera without showing any static frames. So the way we use these, well, firstly, we need to go back to that video input because it has to be applied to the input that it's occurring on. So we're going back to our video input, to the settings, to triggers, and we've got on completion here right now. So I'm clicking on this so that I can now edit it. So I'm going down, I'm selecting on playback remaining, and here I can specify the time. So I'm going to specify 3 seconds. So I'll just type 3 in there, and that will trigger 3 seconds before the end of the video. And now we're going to keep that as a fade, fading to my camera over 2 seconds. Everything is ready to go. I will click on edit, and that has now edited that trigger so that we've now got the correct type of trigger. Okay, we're just about ready to go, but there are a couple of things that I need to fix. So firstly, I'll turn this off. And secondly, because I'm using the on playback remaining, I need to take control of a few things on this video input. I'll explain these as we go. So going to the settings and then going to general, firstly, I need to turn off automatically mix audio. The reason for that is now that I am going to continue this video file playing, even though it is not in output, I don't want the audio to automatically turn off. I want it to continue playing right to its end so that we get that final fade out. Next, I want to set it to automatically restart with transition so that every single time that I play this, it starts from the beginning. And finally, I do not want the video to pause after transition. I want it to play to completion. So I'll untick that. All right, I have this video set up so that it will function the way that I want it to. I think it's time for us to start that countdown timer. So I'll right click and hit title editor and let's hit play. What do you think of that? Didn't have to click anything as soon as I started that timer. Everything happened automatically for me. So now I can start talking about that number 10 again. All right, we are down to the very final trigger, and that is designed for instant replays. So I've got an instant replay set up here. I'm going to go to settings, and we're going to talk about this one very briefly. I'll explain how it works, but I'm not going to do a demonstration. So going to settings, we're going to triggers, and down here we've got on replay events completed. The way that this works is as soon as your events have played out, it will trigger. It's very similar to the on completion trigger. It's just designed for replay events. Now, if you're not familiar with vMix Instant Replay, go and watch some of the videos that we have. That's going to teach you about them. The way that it works is quite similar to a list in that it will wait for all events to play out that you've asked it to play, and then it will fire. And so if you're just doing a single event of a single camera, it'll wait until the end of that playout. If you're doing multiple camera angles, it'll wait till all the camera angles have played out. If you're doing multiple events, it'll wait till all the events have played out and then will trigger. Now, if you're wanting to use things like stingers at the end of your replay, then you will have to take a little bit of extra manual control of vMix and set up things like shortcuts. This is quite an advanced workflow, so make sure that you do plenty of tests. The key thing to understand here is that these triggers operate on either replay A or B. You can set them up independently so you can have different effects depending on which replay channel you are using at the time, which I think is going to be very handy for some of you. Well, that's all of the triggers covered off now. Hopefully some of them are going to be useful for you and you can streamline your workflows and let vMix do a little bit more of the work for you. Now, before I leave, I just wanted to mention one last thing, and that was the Triggers Manager. As you build more and more triggers into your production, it can get a little bit hard to manage them because they're all located in the individual inputs. We have a Triggers Manager so that you can access them all from one place. To get there, you simply go down to the hamburger menu and you click on Triggers Manager. From here, you can see all of your triggers, and you can even access a set of triggers for a particular input by selecting one and then going to the settings of that input. So there we go, we're directly linked to that input's triggers. From this menu, you can also toggle triggers on and off. So if you've got triggers that you only want to use once in a while, you can have them off and then turn them on when needed. All right, that is everything. Thank you very much for joining me on this one. If you do have any questions, I would urge you to head over to vmix.com. There you can find all of our support documentation. You can reach out to us from there, and there's links to our YouTube channel where we have a lot of videos that go through all of the things vMix. I would ask that you don't ask support questions in the comments below because it's really hard for us to provide you with great support there. Instead, email us. Thanks very much for watching, and I will catch you on the next video.